A trust may be defined as a corporation which controls so large a proportion of a given product as to be able to determine the price and conditions of sale. The evil of a monopoly is that it destroys competition and leaves the producer at the mercy of a corporation which can then arbitrarily exact such profits as it pleases. There are certain results which naturally follow from the establishment of a private monopoly. First, corporation raises the price of products. By a monopoly, while the masses are the victims of all monopolies. Monopolies are both corruptive and coercive. By large contributions to campaign funds, they purchase immunity from restraining legislation and from the enforcement of the law. And as they employ an army of laboring men, they can influence elections by threatening employees with starvation.
George and Herman Brown of the Brown and Root Construction Company. Johnson helped the Brown brothers build a billion-dollar construction empire. In turn, the Browns would fund Johnson's political campaigns.
Judgmentally, what I'd say is that they were a couple of guys who were making a lot of money out of the New Deal, and they didn't want to have to pay higher wage rates, so they were against the unions. It wasn't a matter of high principle. They wanted to get rich, and they did get rich. Well, Lyndon sidled up to them, or they sidled up to him, and they made book. I remember asking Johnson once in the White House, did you deal with cash? And he said it was all cash. I mean, there were no records. So in those circumstances, there were plenty of politicians who were selling out to business interests. I use a pejorative term. I don't know what other term to use. I mean, in TV, you have to use some shorthand. I mean, they were agreeing to be with those people in exchange for money, which they used in their campaigns. That's pretty close to selling out, isn't it? And everything is organized not like his father around ideas and ideals, but like the son around himself and his own career. Not to say that he is not therefore doing a lot of good. He brings real electricity to people that don't have it in his own district. Yeah, sure, he's really smart.
On May 2nd, 1939, George Brown wrote Johnson a letter. I hope you know, Lyndon, how I feel in reference to what you've done for me, and I'm going to try to show my appreciation through the years with actions rather than words.
That morning, as Johnson and Kennedy arrived in Dallas, a Maryland insurance agent, Don Reynolds, arrived on Capitol Hill to brief Republican staff members of the Rules Committee. He'd promised proof that the vice president had misused his office for personal gain. He showed the investigators invoices, documents, and diary entries he claimed implicated the vice president.
Don presented a good case. He could back it up. Everything he said he had a receipt for. It's hard to argue with a receipt or a canceled check or an invoice. It's hard to argue with documentation.
3:30, Chief Counselor Van Kirk was called out of the deposition to be told Jack Kennedy had been killed, that Lyndon Johnson had been sworn in as the 36th President of the United States.
Reserve. Protect. Defend. Constitution of the United States. Constitution of the United States.
I knew that if I went back in and told Don Reynolds that Lyndon Johnson was the new president, Kennedy was dead, he'd clam up. So I just went back in and said nothing, and we continued the interview for another 2 or 3 hours. And I tried to get every bit of information out of him I could.
The tragedy in Dallas stalled the investigation for a while. Johnson had no idea that as he was being sworn in, Reynolds was handing over evidence the Republicans hoped to use to impeach him. All he knew at that stage was that continuity was essential, that his team should include all the dead president's staff. This included his nemesis, the Attorney General Robert Kennedy.
For many minutes this afternoon, there was nobody actually at the helm of this great republic. The president lay dead of an assassin's bullet. The vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson, was incommunicado in a hospital suffering from shock. But now, just moments ago, Lyndon B. Johnson has been sworn in as the President of the United States. What is the position that he occupied in terms of his relationship with John F. Kennedy before this act today?
One of the key men in this case is Clint Murchison. Clint Murchison is an oil millionaire, owned 500 companies, but he was primarily an oil millionaire. He also controlled Texas, controlled Johnson. His major means of operating and controlling people and influencing people was a little hotel called the Hotel Del Charro in La Jolla, California. It cost $100 a day in the 50s. And at that hotel, he would invite all these powerful, influential people. Richard Nixon would come there. Key lieutenants of Carlos Marcello, the head of the mafia in New Orleans, used to vacation there. J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, used to vacation there. Free. Every summer for 10 summers, free.
Another Johnson man with close ties to Murchison was a wealthy Texan called D.H. Byrd.
D.H. Byrd was an underboss for Murchison. He was a Del Charro regular. He owned the Texas School Book Depository. He also founded the Civil Air Patrol, which was a kind of military organization, and Lee Harvey Oswald was a member of the Civil Air Patrol. Another associate of Murchison at the time is Bobby Baker. Bobby Baker's in trouble with the scandals, and he was in all kinds of business deals with Murchison, and many of them were illegal. So Murchison was concerned that Baker and that corruption would lead to his door. And maybe not only would Baker go to jail and Lyndon go to jail, but maybe Murchison would go to jail.
Clint Murchison Sr. was one of the wealthiest men in Texas. He was an old-time wildcatter. And he and Sid Richardson had bought the license to run a famous racetrack in California called Del Mar. J. Edgar Hoover spent each August at their racetrack in their box and as their guest in their suite at the hotel there.
Hoover's own snapshots hinted how Murchison, too, indulged Hoover's taste for a one-way bet.
He invested in oil wells, and if the oil well went dry, he got his money back. Before he purchased stock, he wanted to know what the inside information was. He got it, then purchased stock, which is all illegal for any citizen.
And old man Murchison told me that the most important person in the world to be close to was the sheriff, and he owned a piece of Mr. Hoover because he felt by making...
Or not, it's always been true that a public man's private sex life makes him vulnerable. Hoover knew this. He would eventually seek out one of the most distinguished psychiatrists in Washington to ask for advice and help, because he was so terrorized by his own sexuality. What was he, as director of the FBI, to do about these urges that he had?
In Washington, D.C., police detectives were picking up intelligence about Hoover's practice.
Do you expect to delve into any particular fields when you take over as Attorney General?
Well, I think that there are a number of different areas and where action is needed. I think that in the field of organized crime, I think it's in a very serious situation that's facing the country at the present time.
Before the Kennedys, the mob had literally been getting away with murder.
The glory years for the mob were right after the Second World War, right up to 1960. That was it.
Nick Pileggi has written about the mob for 30 years and was co-author of the movie Goodfellas.
They owned politicians. They owned unions. They could actually socialize. The FBI said they didn't exist. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was glorious.
Now, would you explain what evading a place means?
Well,
Jack and Robert Kennedy had studied the mob since 1957, when they took the lead on the McClellan Committee's investigation of organized crime and its association with organized labor. They focused on Jimmy Hoffa, president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the largest union in the country. They were quick to clash.
I would like to say, Senator, that if you're trying to penalize the American labor movement for Hoffa, or for your dislike for Hoffa, then spell it out in the law, exempting everybody except Hoffa. Will you please?
Well, we're exempting everyone but racketeers and hoodlums and crooks.
I would like to have you draft that language, sir.
I'm not talking necessarily...
As Attorney General, Robert Kennedy was determined to convert his knowledge of the mob. Robert Blakey was one of those lawyers.
You just can't know how inefficient and complicated and inept the government is unless it's held together in some way by the force of somebody's personality. Robert Kennedy had that and did that.
He forced FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover to shift manpower and resources away from hunting communists to busting gangsters. He surfaced mob informant Joe Valachi in a nationally televised hearing.
Then he picks your finger. Who? The Godfather. He picks your finger? He picks your finger with a needle. Makes a little blood come out. In other words, Wesley expressed the blood relation. Supposed to be like brothers. That's the letting of blood. That's right.
All of us in that position.
Under Robert Kennedy, successful prosecutions of organized crime figures increased 700%.
By 1963, J. Edgar Hoover was becoming isolated and entrenched within the FBI he had created. Then, just after lunchtime on November 22nd, Hoover called his boss, Bobby Kennedy, to tell him that his brother, the president, had been shot in Dallas.
Got a call from Bobby saying that the president was dead, that he'd gotten a call from Hoover. Then Bobby said, I think Hoover enjoyed telling me.
The next day, while most of the United States was reeling with the size of the tragedy, Hoover went to the races. And what work he did in terms of the FBI's follow-up on the assassination, he did on the telephone from his box at the races.
This is Tony Lewis, taping with Bob Kennedy, and why don't we talk now about the relationship with Mr. Hoover and the FBI?
The relationship between Bobby and Hoover could be summarized in a word: blackmail.
Do you now think that Mr. Hoover is a dangerous person, or just nasty?
No, I think he's dangerous.
Did you ever have the feeling that he knew a very great deal about you, personally?
I suppose every month he'd send somebody around to give information on a member of my family or myself so that it would be clear that he was on top of all of these things and received all of this information. I really deferred to him. I made a real effort because I knew that he didn't like me. He is rather a psycho, and I used to keep his ego up. We used to arrange for him every 2 or 3 months, go over and have lunch alone with the president. I made a fuss over him.
When I say blackmail, I had in mind also Hoover's knowledge of President Kennedy's trysts, shall we say. And he, I think, made it very plain to Robert Kennedy that he knew all about it. And Kennedy knew that Hoover would not hesitate to use it against his brother.
I remember one occasion he said that my brother and I had a group of girls on the 12th floor of the LaSalle Hotel, and that the president used to go over there once a week and have the place surrounded by Secret Service people and then go up and have assignations. And a lot of it was so far-fetched. I mean, it was ridiculous on the face of it.
Now, more with G. Gordon.
Presidents went to him before they were elected to pledge that they would keep him in office. Democrats went to him, Republicans went to him. They had conferences. And he sat there like a king. And the next president was saying, yes, if I'm elected, I'll keep you in office, period.
More than 30 years later, the one surviving eyewitness has broken her silence.
Robert Kennedy said, we both promised each other that we'd never tell what happened that day.
But I am telling what happened.
1 week after the death of JFK, Lyndon Johnson placed a call to J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI. The Kennedys had kept Hoover at arm's length. Dangerous as a rattlesnake, he'd once been called. But that wasn't Johnson's style. He wanted to keep Hoover inside the tent, as this curious little exchange illustrates.
You're more than the head of the Federal Bureau as far as I'm concerned. You're my brother and personal friend, and you have been for 25, 30 years. I got more confidence in your judgment than anybody in town. And I certainly appreciate your confidence. Well, thank you. Thank you.
We are especially fortunate to have Mr. Hoover's strong personal dedication to maintaining the high standards of protection for civil liberties of the individual under our system of law.
The answer is vigorous law enforcement.
That's the only answer.
That's the only answer.
How about justice? You hear a lot about justice with law enforcement.
Justice is merely incidental to law and order. Law and order is what covers the whole picture.
The President would like to talk to Mr. J. Edgar Hoover. Thank you.
Hello, Edgar. I don't hear you well. What's the matter? You got this phone tapped? No. I'm wondering if our wires are tapped at all. Every time I say something in the State Department, I read about it. And it's getting me frightened to even take a call.
I was in the room in Johnson's bedroom with Johnson and John Connally, the three of us alone, on the morning of the nomination for the vice presidency at about 10:30, when Bobby Kennedy stormed in and started screaming at Johnson that if he knew what was good for him, he'd get off that ticket.
Well, Johnson did not like Bobby Kennedy, and it was mutual. They hated each other. So what happened was that Mr. Rayburn and John Connally went in to meet with Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy said that all hell had broken loose on the convention floor and that Johnson was going to have to withdraw, just change his mind and not accept the vice presidency. And Mr. Rayburn looked at him and he said, "Oh," and uttered an expletive that I'm not going to use.
Old man Rayburn said, "Shit, Sonny," and kicked him out.
And I am grateful, finally, that I can rely in the coming months on many others, on a distinguished running mate who brings unity and strength to our platform and our ticket, Lyndon Johnson.
And that was a real transformation in which this young pup, Jack Kennedy, suddenly is it. And he, Lyndon Johnson, big old clumsy Lyndon Johnson, is playing second fiddle. And you got to believe it, that those vice presidential years were agony for him.
It was a terrible sense of having lost that center of dominance. And suddenly, I think he felt like a little kid looking in a glass door at the candy display inside, and he couldn't quite reach it. It was devastating.
It wasn't the way the president treated him. I think Jack Kennedy treated him with due respect. But everybody around Kennedy kind of poked fun at him and made mockery of whatever happened to Lyndon Johnson.
And Kennedy, named him the head of the Space Center. Plus, he sent him on every foreign trip in the history of the world to, try to give him something to do.
Vice President Johnson made ceremonial visits to 26 countries. But he wasn't the kind of man who could get the feel for another culture. Wherever he went, he took his own oversized bed, a special nozzle for his shower, dozens of cases of Cutty Sark, and thousands of personally inscribed ballpoint pens and cigarette lighters as gifts. But at least abroad, he was center stage. At home, there were still the Kennedys. Urbane, charismatic, immensely popular.
He was consumed with this passion of inferiority towards the Kennedys. And they gave him a very hard time when he was vice president. They were going to dump him from their ticket. They made a buffoon of him, a laughingstock. When, as vice president of the United States, he visited Scandinavia, Bobby Kennedy sent an uncoded telegram to the embassies, uncoded so that everyone could see it, saying that the vice president in no way speaks for the government of the United States and is not to be received as if he were an emissary of the president.
As the forces hostile to Kennedy grew in strength and number, they began to think the unthinkable: assassination. Finally, a new imperative forced their hand.
Lyndon Johnson was in big trouble. The Bobby Baker scandal and the Billy Celeste scandal could destroy Lyndon Johnson's career. Lyndon Johnson would go to jail, and he was their man. He represented all these right-wing forces. There was an urgency to kill President Kennedy. They had to save Lyndon Johnson. The governor of Texas, first of all, is Lyndon Johnson's best friend in history. They went back decades together. In the 1948 vote scandal, John Connally was every much a part of that cover-up that took place. He was his campaign manager. It is, without question, John Connally who entices John F. Kennedy to Texas. Once they get him there, then they're in control of everything. Motorcade routes, the evidence, the Dallas police, everything. It's their land. It's their territory. Lyndon Johnson and his Texas cronies suckered President Kennedy to Texas.
Actually, Lyndon Baines Johnson had at least one thing in common with John F. Kennedy.
He was a great womanizer and was someone who, when they tell him about John Kennedy's womanizing, he'd bang the table and say, damn it to hell, I had more women by accident than he ever had on purpose.
The stories of Johnson's affairs are like the man himself, larger than life and somewhat less than refined. Like Kennedy, LBJ allegedly used his secretaries for more than taking dictation.
I was told on good authority that he had sex with a secretary. Johnson came in her office one day, and the story goes that he pulled down the shades, locked the door, and they had sex on a desk in the White House. But that apparently was a one-time thing. It wasn't a sustained relationship.
But Johnson reportedly had extended affairs with at least 2 women back home in Texas.
As old as I am and as long as it's been, my toes still turn up when I think of him.
Madeline Brown was a 23-year-old radio advertising sales representative when she met Congressman Lyndon Johnson at a station party. A few weeks later, he invited her to another party at the Driscoll Hotel in Austin.
And while I was dancing with him there at the Driscoll, he put a key in my hand, and of course I was old enough to know what it was for.
It was the beginning, Brown says, of an affair that lasted for 21 years, and one she claims that produced a son, Stephen, in 1950.
He was a spitting image. Stephen was as much like his father, Lyndon, as 2 peas in a pod. Their feet, I think, was size 13. Their height, his build, he was exactly like his father.
Growing up, Stephen never knew the identity of his father, but Brown says she tried to get Johnson to acknowledge Stephen during their last meeting in 1969.
And he said it'd been too many years, too many heartaches, and it would hurt Lady Bird and the girls.
Brown eventually told her son who his father was, and in 1987, Stephen Brown filed a $10.5 million lawsuit against Lady Bird Johnson, claiming that he had been deprived of his birthright. Before the suit could be tried, Stephen Brown died of lymphatic cancer.
Stephen didn't know during most of his life, however, that LBJ was his alleged dad, did he?
No.
Why didn't you tell your son?
I was told I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything, I didn't repeat anything, and it would have been political suicide for Lyndon to have acknowledged us at that time.
Hey, why don't you just read the letter that Jerome Ragsdale, attorney and counselor law, who was he, first of all?
He was the attorney. I don't have my glasses.
Oh, you don't have your glasses?
Anyway, he was Lyndon's attorney, and he was the liaison between Jess Kellum and
Dear
Lyndon.
Madeline, thank you so much for breaking your plans and meeting with Jess and me. Who's Jess?
That was his hatchet man,
His hatchet
Jess
man.
Kellum.
Okay, Jess and me in Houston last week. I sincerely hope, it's dated incidentally May 18th, 1973. When did LBJ pass away?
He died in January of '73.
So this is several months after he passed
Yes.
away. Okay, I sincerely hope we did not inconvenience you in any way. Those of us who are close to Lyndon are saddened by his recent death. It is fortunate that he died at the ranch. He would have wanted it that way. It is unfortunate, however, that he died so bitter and tormented. As we discussed in Houston, you have my personal assurance that I will continue with the financial arrangements that Lyndon provided for you and Steve throughout the past. I know you were very concerned about this, and I simply wanted to relieve your mind. As always, if you need additional funds for you and Steve's living expenses, please do not hesitate to call me. Of course, I will continue to make weekly home visits to verify you and Steve's welfare. Sincerely yours, Jerome T. Ragsdale, attorney and counselor at law based in Dallas, Texas. What were the financial arrangements, Madeline? How much was it?
My home was paid for, and I had a maid, and I had credit cards, and I had whatever my needs were.
Did you, Madeline, have any encounters with LBJ either immediately before or immediately following the assassination of
Yes,
John
the
Kennedy?
morning of the assassination, he was angry, but he was always angry when Ralph Yarborough and John Connally, there was a political feud going on
Senator
in
Yarborough
Dallas.
of Texas, Governor John Connally of Texas at the time.
He and I had planned a meeting that night in Austin. We were going to the big fundraiser. And he said, well, after today, the blank Kennedys would never embarrass him again. That was no threat. That was a promise. And I kind of laughed it off. I said, oh, after the rendezvous, everything's going to be great. Well, Jess Kellum had called me also, and he was telling me
Hatchet man?
Yeah, the hatchet man. And I said, oh, Jess, he'll be okay. He's just mad. You know, everything's going to be all right.
Why was he so mad at JFK?
The Kennedys were always putting him down and calling him the country bumpkin, and he just didn't like it. They were a stumbling block in his way politically.
When he said that to you, did you take it seriously?
Not at that second. I just thought he was mad.
Did you talk to him at all after the tragedy, after the
yes.
horrible crime?
I met him in Austin on New Year's Eve. And I was real concerned about it because everyone in Dallas was talking about he was responsible for the assassination. So I said to him, Lyndon, I said, you had already told me that after that day, the Kennedys wouldn't embarrass you again. And then Jack Ruby had come out openly and said that Lyndon Johnson was the cause of it. So I said, I've got to be in my mind, I've got to put things to rest. And he had a temper fit. He blew up and just screamed and hollered, and then he calmed down, and he turned around, and he said at that time it was the oil people I knew and the CIA.
Wait, are you saying that Lyndon Johnson, was he now President of the United States?
Yes.
Said to you personally?
Yes.
You swear this?
Swear.
That the oil people and the CIA were involved in the murder of John Kennedy?
Yes.
LBJ said that to you?
Yes.
Was it just the two of you alone?
Yes.
You sure it's not that the passage of years have made your memory foggy?
No.
You're not embellishing this tale, man?
No.
You sit here today and you claim that LBJ said the oil people and the CIA...
Scout's honor.
...killed the president.
Right.
What'd you say?
Well, I was, of course, deeply upset, and I thought, well, I'll never see him again. I can't handle this. But because of Stephen and because of some of the other things, when Jess had called me to come to Austin, I always went.
When was the last time you saw President Johnson?
I saw him in Houston, Texas. I had been in a real bad car wreck, and I had undergone lots of plastic surgery. And I thought that perhaps maybe I had healed well enough to see him, and Jess called and he said he wanted to see me. And the astronauts that had landed on the moon, they were having a big party there in Houston, and we had all been invited. So when Jess told me to come to Houston, I thought, well, I was well enough that I could go. And I met him at the Shamrock Hotel in Houston.
The year?
August of '69.
Do you believe that your former paramour, Lyndon Johnson, had anything at all to do with the death of John Kennedy?
No, I did not have anything.
Do you believe that he had anything to do with it?
Oh, yes. Yes, I do.
You do?
Yes.
As you sit there today, you do?
Yes.
Did you know what he was talking about?
I knew the people that he named, yes, I certainly did. H.L. Hunt was a very dear friend of mine, and 3 days prior to the assassination, H.L. Hunt gave me one of the wanted for treason pamphlets, and they just bombarded Dallas with it. And
wanted for treason, JFK.
Uh-huh.
They thought that the liberal president was a treasonous man.
Right.
Selling the country down the river.
So I said, H.L., you cannot do the President of the United States that way. And he said, well, hell, I can. I'm the richest man in the world. I can do whatever I want to. But Dallas, Texas was bombarded, and he passed them out personally.
Number one, what I do in my book is I perform a criminal investigation of Lyndon Johnson. And while the Warren Commission performed a criminal investigation of Lee Harvey Oswald and determined him to be a murderer without a motive, if you take all of these other possible parties who could have killed the president and combined all their motives together, they wouldn't have as many as Lyndon Johnson himself. He had personal motives, he had economic motives, he had political motives. We start with motive. Then from there we go to opportunity. Lyndon Johnson was involved in planning the trip. After we go to opportunity and you look at the Texas connection, which is what my book is about, everything that was involved in this assassination, pre and post, Lyndon Johnson was involved in. We can go to Jack Ruby. Ask Madeline Brown how she met Jack Ruby.
Did you meet Jack Ruby, Madeline?
Lyndon Johnson's attorney introduced me to him.
Go on.
I'm serious.
Where?
I was coming out of Neiman Marcus, and happened, of course, I knew the attorney, and he was standing talking to Jack Ruby, and he says, I want you to meet Jack Ruby. And so I still...
Wait a second. When was this?
Oh, 1952, I think. Way back.
10 years before the assassination?
Oh, yeah.
So Lyndon Johnson's attorney, which one?
Jerome Ragsdale.
The same guy who wrote you the letter
Yes.
after LBJ died and said that the financial arrangements would be continued. He was standing with Jack Ruby, you say?
Yes.
Did you ever tell any of the authorities this?
Yes.
Who'd you tell?
Well, I told, well, not the Warren Commission. They didn't talk to me.
They didn't ask you
No.
to testify?
No, I was told.
Go on.
I was told if they contacted me in any way...
They should watch some talk shows, these guys. What'd you say, James?
I said the Warren Commission didn't even talk to the closest witnesses to the assassination. Bill and Gail Newman, you know, they were right there. We all remember the pictures of them shielding their children on the grassy knoll. Warren Commission didn't even talk to them.
And there were over a dozen witnesses on the overpass, every one of which was aware that the shots came from the grassy knoll, from behind the stockade fence. Only one was called. And when he said that the others saw the same things that he did, they didn't call any of the others.
Craig Zerbel, who picked the Warren Commission?
Let me just tell you this. What these two men are saying, who are experts in the assassination, is absolutely true. The Warren Commission was a politically biased entity created by Lyndon Johnson for the sole purpose of getting him out of another political scandal. This one, of course, the worst of his career. And the reason I say that, if you look back in history, 1963, November 22nd, what happened? The Texans came out and they said it was a lone killing, a lone assassin. And if you look at law, at the killing of a president in 1963, if it was caused by a lone assassin, was only subject to state jurisdiction, not federal. And Texans came out and they said it was a lone killing. Therefore, they had exclusive jurisdiction to investigate the case and prosecute.
Craig, are you indicting the whole Lone Star State in your theory?
I don't have to, Geraldo, and the reason for that is, if you look at history, and no one is going to deny it on this panel, on the evening of the assassination, the truth of the matter is Lyndon Johnson called people in Dallas, including the Dallas district attorney, and told him to charge Lee Harvey Oswald with being a lone assassin, regardless of whether anything else he could prove.
Do you allege that LBJ himself called together a group of co-conspirators and said to them, I want this man dead, I want him to be killed in Dallas?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that he specifically ordered a murder?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you go back and look at history, in 1961, Billy Saul Estes, who was one of the people involved with the scandal involving Johnson, has testified that Johnson ordered the killing of an agricultural agent down in Texas. That was when he was vice president. An interesting point that Robert brings up when he discusses his theory involving secret team is that what you state in your book is that the way we can determine the people who are involved in a secret team is by looking at who got the best jobs afterwards, and that's on page 439 of your book. Who in the world got the best job after the assassination? Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Geraldo, if I may interject for a moment, you said who put the Warren Commission together. The answer is Lyndon Johnson. He appointed them. He asked Earl Warren to head the President's Commission. Warren said no, he didn't want to do it. He was basically drafted by Johnson and told that he had to do it. It was a matter of national security, that if the truth were known about this, that it could lead to World War III. The phony evidence planted against Lee Harvey Oswald that he was working for Fidel Castro, had that been made known to the public and had they believed it, Johnson would have no alternative. He would have had to invade Cuba. Had he done that and Castro survived and asked for help from Khrushchev, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, could not back down a second time. This was the excuse. This was the cover. And this is how they were brought in. You mentioned about the making of the commission and who assigned them. Lyndon Johnson had made the statement that one of those Warren Commission members, someone who we all know named Gerald Ford, could not chew gum and urinate at the same time. I think that's a very accurate statement. But if he honestly felt that way about Gerald Ford, why did he name him to this most important of commissions? And worse than that, President Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs, fired Allen Dulles as director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Dulles hated Kennedy. His whole career was ruined by Kennedy, and he got to be named one of the 7 Warren Commission members. He certainly had an axe to grind.
The late Madeleine Brown gained a unique insight into Johnson's role in Kennedy's assassination. She first met LBJ in 1948 at the Adolphus Hotel in downtown Dallas, when he was celebrating his election to the Senate following the infamous Box 13 scandal.
I went, I was very young, and it was wonderful. Our relationship developed immediately. Lyndon gave another campaign party in Austin. It was 3 weeks after I met him at the Adolphus, and it was scheduled at the Driscoll Hotel. And, oh, it was so great to see him. I mean, for 3 weeks I had thought about him and how wonderful it was. We were dancing that night, and he says, I'll see you upstairs. And he put a key in my hand. I still have that key. It was exciting. I felt naughty, but I felt good. I fell deeply in love with him. Yes, I did. I was just the other woman in his life, and my emotions are still the same for him as they were when I met him as a very young girl. But I'll always love him. He was the father of my son, Stephen.
That intimate relationship with Johnson continued for many years. Through him, she became familiar with the closed world of power politics in Texas. On the eve of Kennedy's assassination, she attended a party at this house in North Dallas, the family home of oil billionaire Clint Murchison Sr. There was an extraordinary guest list that night.
We had H.L. Hunt, Murchison, Lyndon Johnson made an appearance. We had Hoover, we had Richard Nixon, They were the most influential people there. But I was under the impression that since J. Edgar Hoover was there, that it was to honor Hoover rather than anything else. When Lyndon came in, no one was expecting him. So when Lyndon arrived at Clint Murchison's, they all went into a conference room, and you could just feel the atmosphere. And when Lyndon came out, I was, of course, happy to see him. I did not know that he was going to be there. And he whispered in my ear at that time, "Those blank-de-blank Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise." So he departed. The party rapidly broke up after Lyndon departed.
A seamstress and companion, May Newman, provides confirmation that this party took place at the Murchison family home on the eve of the assassination. She lived and worked in another Murchison house in Dallas for Virginia, Clint Sr.'s second wife. She speaks here for the first time.
I started working for Virginia Murchison in 1962 until her death in 1997, approximately 36 years. I remember well the night before the assassination. I worked with a man called Jewel Pfeiffer, black man, which was Virginia Murchison's chauffeur. He got a call from her stepson, John, at the big house. They were having a big party for a very special guest that was coming from Washington to go to the party by the name of Bulldog, which I found out later was J. Edgar Hoover. And he said he was very excited about doing this, going on this trip out to the airport to take this special guest to a very special party, big party. And I asked him when he came back if he got a good tip, and he said no, and he was very, very upset. He had to go back that night to take J. Edgar Hoover to the airport to go back to Washington. And he still didn't get a tip.
Further verification of Hoover's presence in Dallas on the eve of the assassination came from a friend of May's who worked at the Murchison family home.
Beulah May Holman, she was the cook at John and Lupe's house, and she wanted me to go help her that night, which I didn't, but I knew she told me she was cooking quail, and I wanted the recipe, so she gave it to me. She said it was a very important guest by the name of J. Edgar Hoover that was coming in, and I should go out and help her so I could get to meet him. If it was a film star, I probably would have gone, but I didn't know who he was. No, not at that time.
Early the next morning, only a few hours before the assassination, Madeline received a phone call from Johnson, who was back in Fort Worth with Kennedy.
Lyndon called me from the Texas hotel, and he was still irate. I said, "Lyndon, about last night," and he went to cursing. He used foul language all the time, and he said, "Those Kennedys," he repeated, "they will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise." And I'd like the entire world to know how I personally feel is the fact Lyndon Johnson knew about the assassination and was a part of it.
Yes.
J. Edgar Hoover on 2192.
Are you familiar with this proposed group that they're trying to put together on this study of your report?
No, I haven't heard of that. I've seen the reports on the Senate investigating committee that they've been talking about.
I want to get by just with your file and your report.
It would be very, very bad to have a rash of investigations.
Well, the only way we can stop them is probably to appoint a high-level one to evaluate your report.
Yeah.
And put somebody that's pretty good on it from that I can select and tell the House and Senate not to go ahead with the investigation.
Yeah.
There's a photograph that I published in Texas in the Morning, and the White House photographer told, you can see that Lyndon lost composure at the time. Bobby hits a post, and he has something in his hand, and Lyndon is real shocked. And the photographer said that Robert Kennedy said to him, "Why did you have my brother killed?"
Our president was as a gentleman and a human being. This man is not.
Yeah.
He's mean, bitter, a vicious animal in many ways. I think he's got this other side of him in his relationship with human beings, which make it very difficult unless you want to kiss his behind all the time. He's able to eat people up.
But I understand that, he sends all kinds of reports over to you about me and about the Department of Justice.
Not any that I've seen. What are you talking about?
Well, I just understand that he's about me planning and plotting things.
But he hadn't sent me any report on you or on the department. Anytime.
Well, I had understood that he had sent reports over about me plotting the overthrow of the government by force and violence.
No.
Leading a coup.
No, that's an error. He never has said that or indicated or given any indication of it.
As I say, we'll all get through.
Okay. Yeah, I'll talk to you in a day or two. Bye.
He did have a back channel. He read them, I think, to make him feel a little more comfortable with what he thought were his enemies. Have a little more information on his enemies. They would be hand-carried to a male assistant, and the president would read them in the presence of that man and hand them back to that man.
Dallas was to become forever linked with the murder of the president. But the rich and powerful men who had met in secret the night before had everything to gain from his death. LBJ was fearful of a long prison sentence, J. Edgar Hoover of losing his job, and the oil men of losing millions of dollars. When the shots rang out on Elm Street the next day, those problems were solved. The shock of Kennedy's assassination and its brutality reverberated around the world, but not everyone was grieving.
The mood in the Murchison family home was very joyous and happy for a whole week after, like champagne and caviar flew every day of the week. But I was the only one in that household at the time that felt any grief for his assassination.
After the president's murder, Hoover had absolute control of the cover-up. All the physical evidence relating to the crime was swiftly removed to Washington.
I had a request, and I have it here, where Mr. Wade requested, said, "I request that you turn all of the evidence obtained in the investigation of Lee Oswald's assassination of the president over to the FBI for mailing to Washington." We're turning all of our physical evidence over to the FBI.
This was on the direct orders of the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover.
From the beginning, Oswald was promoted as the lone nut assassin, but in LBJ's home state, tongues were wagging.
I met Lyndon on New Year's Eve at the Driscoll Hotel in Austin, and the people in Dallas, I mean, everyone was talking about Lyndon Johnson was the cause of the assassination, and it made my heart very heavy. I just couldn't believe that he could be a part of something so bad. So I confronted Lyndon. I said, "Lyndon, you've got to tell me, were you part of the assassination?" And of course he had a high temper fit, hit the wall, and he was very irate and angry. And he said, "No, I was not, but the oil people," or he called them the fat cats of Texas that I knew, and the intelligence was the cause of the assassination. I am sure Lyndon did not make the plans per se, but he had the key people that he could call to actually do it.
If the head of the FBI and the head of the Secret Service and key lieutenants of those two figures are involved in covering up, plus the President of the United States and all his cronies, you don't need a massive conspiracy to get away with this.
After the assassination, Cliff Carter, Johnson's aide, made repeated calls from the White House to the district attorney in Dallas, Henry Wade. He was instructed to look no further than Oswald for the guilty man. There was no conspiracy. A similar call was made to the Attorney General of Texas, Wagner Carr.
Then we have Lyndon Johnson himself calling the chief of homicide, Will Fritz, who's really doing the dirt work as far as interrogating Oswald and trying to get to the bottom of this case. He calls him and tells him, you have your man. You have your man. Let it go at that. Lyndon Johnson is trying to control what is going on with the investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy from Washington, D.C., with crucial figures in the case.
The late Dr. Charles Crenshaw experienced the new president's controlling hand. He was in the operating theatre at Parkland Hospital with his colleagues, working to save Oswald's life after Jack Ruby had shot him. He was urgently called to the phone in an adjoining office.
I picked up the phone, and it was there I heard this voice like thunder that stated, "This is the president, Lyndon B. Johnson." And he asked, "How is the accused assassin doing?" I was so startled. The thing that I could say was, he's holding his own. He's lost a large amount of blood. He said, "Would you take a message to the chief operating surgeon?" It was more of an order than a question. So I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "There is a man in the room. I would like for him to take a deathbed confession." And all of a sudden, the phone went off. I returned to the operating room. I tapped Dr. Shires on the shoulder. He looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" Everyone was working feverishly in the abdomen trying to correct the wounds there. I said, "Guess who I've been talking to?" I said, "The President of the United States called and wants that man over there to take a deathbed confession." And Shires looked at me like I was crazy, and we both realized that there was no way Lee Harvey Oswald, had he survived, would have been able to give any testimony until 2 or 3 days after the procedure. But still in all, the president had called, and I did relay the message.
When Dr. Crenshaw published his story in 1992, he suffered an avalanche of criticism. It was argued that Johnson made no such call. Crenshaw's critics were proved wrong by a former chief switchboard operator at Parkland Hospital, Phyllis Bartlett.
The call came in and said, "Hold the line for the president." And for a second, I couldn't, I was still thinking Kennedy, and I was kind of taken back for a minute, and then in a few seconds, it was just a matter of a second, he came on in a loud voice. He said, "This is Lyndon Johnson. Connect me to the accused assassin's doctor." It sounded the same as it had been on newscasts when I would hear him speak. I knew I had put a call to the operating room, so I contacted Dr. Crenshaw, and I told him, that I knew he did get the call, and that I was sorry that the people had, in the newspaper and on the TVs, had tried to discredit him. And that was when I spoke out.
From the moment he became president, Johnson had authority over every aspect of the cover-up of Kennedy's murder. He was unassailable.
Johnson has the power to contain the investigation, both nationally and locally, on the ground in Texas. More so than if it had happened, let's say, in Oregon or Wisconsin. Texas. He's got the power to give the CIA what it wants as president, as opposed to Kennedy, who they feared. He's got the power to take the National Security Action Memorandum that Kennedy had signed in November of 1963, tear it up, reverse it, and create a war where 3 million soldiers wound up going to Vietnam instead of 16,000 being brought home by JFK. He can make J. Edgar Hoover director of the FBI for life. He's the man in the middle. The only person that can answer all of the questions of who's at risk, who's going to gain the most, who wins in this deal, there's only one answer to that question, and that's Lyndon Johnson. And his ticket out was Elm Street.
One of the most compelling pieces of evidence linking Johnson with the assassination is through his henchman Malcolm Wallace, the convicted killer of Douglas Kinzer. In the hours following the assassination, on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building by the southeast corner window, the Dallas police discovered an unidentified fingerprint.
The fingerprint is the ultimate part of the Mac Wallace story. The FBI fingerprinted every Texas School Book Depository employee, including the women employees who worked downstairs, never handled the boxes. They fingerprinted every Dallas officer that was in the sniper's nest so that they could remove those fingerprints from consideration. At the end of the day, you have one fingerprint remaining. It sits in the National Archives for 35 years, until 1998. An investigator takes it to a highly qualified, certified latent print examiner, a CLPE, along with a redacted fingerprint card from Mac Wallace from the 1951 murder of John Douglas Kinzer. And he said, here's a print card. Do you see anything?
Nathan Darby is one of the most experienced fingerprint experts in the United States, with 35 years service in the U.S. military and the City of Austin Police Department.
I didn't know where it came from, and a week or 10 days later, I called the party that had brought it over and said, well, it's a match. The finger that made the ink print also made the latent, and we called that a match or identified. And there was no question about it. They matched.
3 years later, Nathan Darby readdressed the same evidence and reconfirmed his original findings.
When he was done, he had a 34-point match. And when you mention that in criminal circles to an investigator, how confident would you feel with a 34-point match? Oh, that's a slam dunk. It can't miss. It doesn't get any better than that. You give me a 34-point match on any case in the United States, I'll take it to court and win.
The inked and the latent print are made by the same finger. And the other evidence that I've been presented with was Malcolm Wallace's left little finger, without a reasonable doubt.
Now, the fingerprint in question came from a cardboard box in the sniper's nest in the Texas School Book Depository. Fingerprints do not last long on cardboard. So it's fair to say that either Malcolm Wallace was wandering around there for no purpose. He was in that sniper's nest on November 22nd. That evidence, that fingerprint evidence, along with Malcolm Wallace's sordid resume, was sent to every imaginable agency or individual that could have an interest in what happened to John Kennedy. The only people that took notice of it were the Dallas police, because it's still an open homicide on their blotter. And they took serious notice of it. And then they were told, forward it up the line, because Dallas no longer has any evidence. It's all in federal hands, even though it's an unsolved homicide. They forwarded it up the line. And it took 18 months for the FBI to say verbally, no, it's not a match. And the single most important fingerprint found in the last 35 years was buried.
I don't know why they couldn't say that the thing didn't match. It did match. There's no question about it. My experience, I've just had too much experience. I know what I'm talking about. I'm positive. There's no question about it. My dying declaration, if I was to drop dead right now, they match.
It's still the big lie. It's unknown. It's unidentified. No, it's identified. It's Malcolm Wallace, and he's linked to Estes, Carter, and Lyndon B. Johnson directly.
According to the official record, Malcolm Wallace died in a single car accident on this lonely stretch of Texas highway on the night of January 7th, 1971. There were no witnesses. His body was taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. He was buried here close to other family members. 8 months later, another key member of LBJ's inner circle, presidential aide Cliff Carter, died unexpectedly. But shortly before his death, he met with Billy Solestes.
They discuss all these murders that Cliff Carter is knowledgeable about. Now, Billy knows about some of them, but Cliff knows about more, and he fills him in on all the details. Malcolm Wallace being a central figure in most of these murders. And there are over 17 murders that Carter tells Estes about. And he actually tells Estes that he fears for his own life. And within 2 days' time, he's dead.
Johnson's attorney, Edward Clark, was one person who prospered. But when LBJ was brought low by the Vietnam War and decided not to run for a second term, Clark felt shortchanged for his role in the assassination, according to his legal partner, Barr McClellan.
He expected $8 million spread over 8 years, over the 2 terms Johnson was to serve. When those terms were cut short by Johnson's sudden and unexpected resignation, Clark was $4 million short. He was not a man to be denied. When he had done a service, he was going to be paid. Planning ahead, he went to Big Oil and Big D, went to Clint Murkison to say, look, I've done y'all a great service. I deserve more. I'm going to get it. Murkison agreed with him and suggested he file for a well in the middle of the great East Texas oil field. He called me in as his personal attorney to make the first bid for getting that money, and he was not successful in getting $4 million, but he got his $2 million. So when all was said and done, Clark realized $6 million for the assassination of John Kennedy.
Barr McClellan believes documentary proof of these dark deeds lies in the Johnson-Clark legal records. For many years, they were kept in a high-security area above the Clark offices, known as the penthouse.
Any of us attorneys could get into the general area, but the secret area, the Johnson area, was locked off, accessible to no one. I have a strong belief that there are substantial records somewhere that show this conspiracy and its both evolution, its execution, and its cover-up. But I don't know where they'd be. We need to see them.
Johnson was ultimately consumed by the high office he had so unscrupulously striven for. A broken man, he retreated to his Texas ranch, where his lawyers were to secretly summon a psychiatrist to deal with his deepening depression.
An immediate concern at the law firm was that he would say too much. The $1 million was available to the psychiatrist to keep anything from coming out. The one reason for all these protections was the greatest demon that was dogging Johnson at the time, and that was the assassination of John Kennedy and the role he played in it. We had to keep it covered up, and for sure we had to keep the psychiatrist muzzled, and we did. But if any one set of records needs to be produced, the psychiatric records should be disclosed to the American public, because they will, I am confident, disclose his role in the assassination.
Only 4 years after leaving office, Johnson died. But there are those living who are still afraid to come forward to tell what they know about the guilty men.
People are afraid of him dead. He's been dead since 1973, and his shadow still casts fear in this country, especially in Texas.
We'll wrap up American Perspectives tonight with an oral history from Don Hewitt. He's better known today as the creator of 60 Minutes. But in November 1963, he was the executive producer of the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
I am still not satisfied that there isn't a lot more to the Lee Harvey Oswald story, especially, now this will stun you, since one of the respected Republicans who ever held office, Republicans, really solid guy, said to me in front of witnesses that he once asked Richard Nixon, "What do you know about the Kennedy assassination?" And Nixon said, "You don't want to know." I tell you, I got cold chills that morning. Somebody told me just this morning that Jackie's papers have
some revelations about the assassination. I don't know whether that's true or not. But I am so convinced that one guy did not plan, and that the theories that Richard Nixon, you don't want to know. But do you know that when Earl Warren, you could find this quote, and you probably have it, walked out on the steps after the last Warren report said, "We may not know the truth in our lifetime." And I said, wait a minute, what does he mean by that? There were so many things going on. I don't know whether the Dallas Police Department was in on this thing. You've got Lee Harvey Oswald in your jail. There hasn't been a more important prisoner since John Wilkes Booth. That they didn't cordon off at least a square mile around that. They would cordon off the jail after they got Terry McNichols and the guys in Oklahoma City. That they handled it so cavalierly that a Jack Ruby walks into that garage, all the cameramen are in there. How do you know who those cameramen are? You don't know who those people are. They are treating him like he's some pickpocket they picked up on the street. Now, Ruby kills Oswald. The Dallas police grab Ruby. The next thing I know, I see Ruby in the hallway on television of the police headquarters being interviewed by guys. And I'm saying, wait a minute, you just lost the most important prisoner in the history of the United States, next to maybe John Wilkes Booth. Now you've got the third most direct, because this is the guy who could be your link to what happened. And you're treating him like you picked up some pickpocket on the street. The police work in this town was atrocious. Now, here's what I also can't figure. I can't figure out, if nobody in Washington is involved in this, why a J. Edgar Hoover isn't on the phone saying to the police chief here, I forget his name. Jesse Curry, saying, Jesse, for Christ's sake, will you cordon off the police station? Stop leaving these guys out there and let the press come and talk to them. Are you nuts? What kind of police work is that? Nobody did. You think about it. There's a Watergate connection here. That's the same crowd. Do I know it? No, I don't know it for sure. But am I about 99% sure of it? Yes.
I'll show you a map upstairs. That one of the chill elements for me was when I first started working here and researching things. If you draw, Oswald was put out at the rooming house in Oak Cliff where he lived.
Yeah, right.
And he started walking, which was south,
right,
down, and he got the intersection Patton and 10th where he shot Officer Tippett.
Right.
If you keep drawing that straight line, because at that point he turns and goes west to the Texas Theater. You go that straight line, you hit Jack Ruby's apartment. He goes about 10 blocks, halfway to Ruby's apartment if you go straight. Now, if you turn, and you start on the other way, you obviously go to the Texas Theater. So it's just, there again, it's one of those moments you go, where was he going? Because obviously you don't walk this far to...
That bears out my feeling that the two of them knew each other. I have no doubt.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, do I know any more than that? No. I wish I knew more than that. Would I have loved to have been the guy who broke that story? Did I think we had it? The guy who was working with us was the attorney for the Republican senator who said, Nixon said, you don't want to know. Nixon knew a lot. I think Lyndon Johnson knew a lot. I think, well, you know, there are people who think Lady Bird did it. Lyndon Johnson put Allen Dulles on the Warren Commission, I think, to kind of calm the country down. I think they thought, if the truth ever comes out here, we are ripe for a revolution.
This is the day that Johnson was going to get his revenge. Johnson didn't particularly like Jack Kennedy. He hated Bobby Kennedy. J. Edgar Hoover has told me that chapter and verse. And so
if you just keep in mind who profited most from the assassination, and then ask yourself some questions. Who appointed the members of the Warren Commission? And who runs the CIA, which has concealed a tremendous amount of evidence? And who runs the FBI?
I think there's a possibility that one could have come from in front of us. We've never been able to prove that. But just in my mind, and by the direction of the blood and brain from the president from one of the shots, it would just seem that it would have to be fired from the front rather than behind.
Had Kennedy lived, I think we'd have had no Vietnam War, with all of its traumatic and divisive influences in America.
If Kennedy had not been killed, if Khrushchev had not been thrown out of power, we would have seen the Cold War come to an end much, much sooner.
The Warren Commission, I think, either was unable to learn the truth and to complete the investigation, or they decided to conceal some of the truth based on what they saw as the vital interest of the nation. Whatever has been written more recently about John F. Kennedy, about his personal life and some personal weaknesses, I hold that he was a great president. He had great plans for the future of the United States and the world, that had great promise for the entire world. The world could have turned out quite differently if those plans were realized. And my question is, was this really to the liking of some people both in your country and perhaps in our country and elsewhere? That's my question.
And I believe that there could very well be an understanding of the good people of this country that he went into Dallas knowing full well everything that had happened to Ambassador Stevenson and still insisted that it was his duty to go there. He was brave enough and determined enough to go there, and finally was determined that that bubble should not be put on top of the cup. I don't see how anyone can ignore that. And I believe that people do realize, regardless of what their ambitions are or what their policies are, that here was a man that to the bitter end courageously stood up for what he considered to be right, whether you look at it from the world picture of peace or whether you look at it for inherent decency within the country.
Of course, this is not an isolated event in American history. I think it's one of the stains on our star-crossed history that among the great civilized nations of the world, the assassination of a chief executive happens more often in this country than anywhere else. Now, why is that? An event like this has been a profound shock to everyone in this country. Is it possible that President Johnson's task may be made easier as a result of this shock by the introduction of a sense of reality and importance into the sometimes romanticized aspects of American politics? Mr. Heilbrunner.
I was like many other people brooding about that very question last night when I couldn't sleep well. And I recalled something that struck me very much at the time when I first read a passage in Disraeli's novel Sybil, in which he discusses the war between the two nations. And someone in the novel, I forget who, naively asks who the two nations are, and Disraeli says the rich and the poor, the two nations that war in every country.
No one can rewrite history, but we can all hope that the lessons learned here in Dallas during these past 3 days will teach us something.
Can a nation organized and governed such as ours do? That is the real question. have we the nerve and the will? Can we carry through in an age where we will witness not only new breakthroughs in weapons of destruction, but also a race for mastery of the sky and the rain, the ocean and the tide, the far side of space, and the inside of men's minds?